Welcome back to the second and final hour of Amplify, a telephone talk show that looks at life from a religious perspective. Our guest this evening is Marcia Sinitar. We're talking about her latest book, Don't Call Me Old, I'm Just Awakening, Spiritual Encouragement for Later Life. We've been speaking in the themes that a lot of despair in life flows from our false beliefs that life is over just because we're older, and that those with a deep spiritual perspective sense that death is unreal. We know that life is eternal, and so we need to look for that spiritual awakening that comes from the awareness that indeed God is not only with us, but that God is within us. Marcia, I'm sorry that during the end of that first hour, you were still talking when we went to the news, and we were talking about the whole concept of hope. If you'd like to repeat that in any way.
As I was kind of long-winded there, but I think the bottom line is that you recover hope as you recover your delights, the things that you were born to understand, to do, to participate with. And I think it's important to locate these compelling interests before we retire, long before we retire.
And you point out, you write in your book, that this spiritual awakening is something that is progressive, much like we have learned from the stages of the spiritual life that many mystics have taught us, that it begins with insight, proceeds to purification, illumination, surrender, and finally union.
That's right. And I think the last caller, or one of the last callers, alluded to that when she said that no matter, just if you have a little bit of money, a little bit of security, you can create this contemplative or worshipful environment that allows that final, one psychiatrist called it final integration. However, most people, I would say the majority of people, want everything simple, and so they expect this to come easily, and it does come easily, but you have to keep at it. You have to keep reading the Bible. You have to keep around, you have to be with people who are encouraging you in your spiritual walk. And of course you have to be kind of disciplined about it.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone is religiously inclined, and so if we can look at someone like Albert Schweitzer, who loved music. That was sort of an avocation for him.
In fact, I think in one of your other books, as I recall, I'm remembering, he sang love songs to God, didn't he?
I think he did. I have a hard time remembering everything that I've written. But I remember one story about him, and I think I tell it in this book, that someone came and watched him. I think it was Norman Cousins, interviewed him late in life. He was 87 or 92 or something like that. And he was all bent over and arthritic as he approached the piano. And he started playing some of his favorite Baroque pieces, and as he was playing, he was completely transformed physically. He started to sit up straight, the color in his face came back, his fingers seemed to straighten out. And I guess the point I was making, and it relates to hope, is that we're never too old for that kind of passion, whether it's the enjoyment of a grandchild, or music, listening to music, gardening, our home, a pet, friends. The important thing is to keep it going.
Right. If we believe life is worth living, that belief will help to create the fact.
That's right, exactly. And every day, I don't care if you're 20 years old or 120, as a matter of fact, the centenarians do better at all of this than the younger people.
Mm-hmm.
What I started to say was every day I think we have to do a few things that we enjoy doing. And it's not so much that we go to a concert, let's say, but that we play music in the home. Or while we're washing the dishes, we do it in a way that gives us joy. It's so simple.
Yes. And I love this question that you posed. If I didn't know how old I was, how old would I feel?
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, you all know, we all know people who look pretty old, but really, when you have a heart-to-heart talk with them, they tell you they don't feel any older than 30 years old.
Yes.
And that's the real person. That's the real core self, the heart that never dies. Never ages, never dies, always loves.
Again, we're going to open our phone lines. If you'd
Good.
like to join us with your comments or questions, you can call us locally at 412-333-KDKA or on the Choice One Communications toll line, which is 1-877-855-KDKA. Now let's go to Paul. Paul, you're on Amplify on KDKA.
Oh, hi, Father
Uh-huh.
Ron. I'm wondering, is there a goal to the second half of life? Is there a goal to old age?
You mean a different one than the first half?
Right. What I'm getting at is the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung said that the goal of the second half of life is our death. And I think what he meant by that, it's a very religious goal.
Mm-hmm.
Something related to that. He claimed that the only cure for a midlife crisis, in other words, that transition from the initial goal where we set our feet in the world, get established. He said the only solution to a midlife crisis was to adapt a religious attitude toward life and make that descent to our death. And he didn't mean, that's an end, but I just wondered if y'all had any comments about that, and I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you. Marcia?
Beautiful question, and I think if we could say there was a goal, it would be, for me anyway, union with the divine, that ascent of consciousness where we meet the Holy Spirit or Christ or the God of our understanding, however a person would language it. And the way I tried to express it in this book, actually I was quoting a French monk who talked about that eternity that I said, I quoted Exodus, and he said, while we are alive, we can come into what is going to be our occupation in eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's our job. And what is our occupation in eternity? Well, maybe it will differ from person to person, individual to individual, but certainly it is to have a relationship with God, a communion with God, all glory to God. It's just as simple as that.
You, it was a previous interview. You said that Albert Einstein sang songs to God. St. Francis listened for angels.
Yes.
And then there was a quote in this book. I'm not remembering who it was, but it was a psychiatrist who said that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can an old person, because that's the difference between dogs and people.
Isn't that beautiful?
We can learn, we can awaken at any age.
That's right. That's exactly right. So however we're going to phrase this, and I love what the last caller said about Jung's discussion, but I would say a little differently. I don't know if it's death that we need to encounter or grapple with so much as encountering eternity. Once you have that true encounter with the dazzling ultimate reality while you're alive, the sting of death is gone,
right.
And you realize that you live forever.
Right. You also write about Albert Schweitzer, who believed that as long as he had a job to do and a good sense of humor, no disease could find a home in his body, and music was his medicine.
That's right. That's exactly. That's a beautiful way of putting it. That his own love of music, of his work as a healer, and I think he was more than a doctor. I think he was a healer. These things would prevent disease from finding a place in his body. I love the way he put that.
And you also point out that if we're going to look at what might be happening during that later part of our life, that age teaches us that it is our duty to be and to do what we love.
Yes, that's right. And this is a continuing theme of mine. I thought maybe when I first started writing this way that it was too idealistic. And lo and behold, the older I get, the more certain I am. And I do not exaggerate when I say that the love that we have for something, whatever it is, whether it's a garden like Agatha Christie, who used to talk to her characters, Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot. She used to talk to them in the garden while she was walking about. This giving of oneself to the future comes only through love. I don't know another word for it, and of course I'm not speaking about romantic love. I'm speaking about the agape love.
Mm-hmm. And you point out that when we talked about education, that everything and everyone is our teacher, and there's so much that we need to learn, but is it not also true that there's much that we need to unlearn?
That's right. You know, even this conversation where we're kind of working through sorting out some of these issues with each other, I think that's part of an unlearning, where we're throwing away the things that are not useful to us. For example, we talked earlier about younger people in the aging process, and one of the points that I'm making is how important it is to learn how to use our leisure time while we're young. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we're unlearning the false commitments, the false gods that we've been given by our parents and teachers and society. This is a lifelong process. There's no such thing as, okay, I learned that lesson, it's over now. No, they return, they come back. And we have to rise to a new level of mastery. And as I was saying earlier, mastery means walking it out in our life. Mm-hmm. Like my grandmother, who in her 80s had many challenges, I think very much like you were talking about your mother. She had many, many challenges, and she kept bringing her optimism to a higher level in daily life. She played cards with her friends. She went dancing at a club that she belonged to. She played bridge, and she was a joy for her friends to be around, but she worked at it.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to our line. Good evening, you're on Amplify on KDKA. Ernest?
Yes, sir. How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Do people who seem to adhere to the words of Jesus tend to live longer?
Okay, let's try to answer that.
I don't have the answer to that. I'm sorry. When we look at the centenarians, who are the longevity models for us, we do find certain Christly attitudes, if I can just mention those, and maybe that'll be sort of an answer. For one thing, they tend to be very forgiving. These tend to be individuals who, for example, came through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, World War II, the Korean War, whatever, and they found a way to reconcile any harm that was done to them or their families, and now they're giving back to the future. These are contented individuals. They tend to be gentle individuals. They don't tend to be combative. I remember looking at a film of centenarians that was on HBO called A Century of, I don't know what it was called, but it's on every once in a while. And one woman who had lost her family, she had lost her eyesight, she was still working, she was over 100, she's working, if you can imagine, in some capacity. And she was crying about how beautiful life was, and and all she said was, I wish I could do it all over again. It is so beautiful. To me, that's Christly.
Right, and there are many studies that have shown from different interviews that I've had over the years that people of faith do indeed live longer lives.
Yes, that's true.
It does not protect them from pain and suffering, but nevertheless they do live longer lives. I think there's no question about that. The majority of us, you point out to us, feel that life is worth living when we are contributing to others, and so it's never too late, as we were speaking just a moment ago, to get involved in doing what it is that we love.
Exactly.
And you say that's part of what you're doing, working with professionals, and that all of us should be finding something wonderful to love in our lives.
And this goes back to younger people. I would have to say that all of my life, I have looked to people older than myself to tell me stories, maybe their wisdom, but I did not want lectures. And even today, I try not to lecture younger people, because I think they get parent deaf and teacher deaf. They turn us off. But if we are simply present with another human being, that is a tremendous gift. And we know that young people today, parents are working harder than ever, holding 3-4 jobs, single parenting much of the time, young people facing a job market that's insecure. How wonderful if in our trip to the market where they're bagging our groceries, we just offer them appreciation for who they are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a gift.
Right, and you also write that loving absorption with whatever matters most to us is a great healer because it enables us to tap into a pure regenerative force.
I do believe, this is going to sound kind of odd, I do believe that this positive engagement with something that matters to us is probably the only true healer, because I think God comes to us in the form of our loves. He comes in the despair that we have as hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's the bird in our heart, that's singing despite the pain, that's talking about eternity, despite the fact that we know this life is, a mortal coil, so to speak. But I do think that God comes in various disguises, and we know God is love. And when we're touched with hope, with passion, with caring for another, with giving of ourselves and our care to the future, appreciating the little flower that's blooming in the sidewalk, this is God.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean when you tell us that each of us needs to awaken to 3 spiritual understandings: God, self, and work?
Well, God, number one, it goes back to the entire conversation,
right,
that probably the goal of our life is to learn how to fellowship, how to trust, how to glorify God. Self, the true self, the core self, we're born to live the work of the soul, and that relates to soul. I do think that the soul is, in a sense, trapped in the false beliefs that we have, and so it's our job to get out of the way, to make a way. You know how it says in, I think, the book of Isaiah, that God makes the crooked ways straight, and He strengthens the limbs that are weak. Well, it's our job to be open to that, to let that happen, and to be kind of an instrument. I think it was St. Francis who says, "Let me be an instrument of thy love." So that's kind of what I mean, that we find our way. Now, look, I speak this way. It sounds very holier than thou. I struggle every day to get out of bed and
yes,
put on my optimist's face and get out there, despite the fact that I don't feel like doing it. And so I'm definitely putting these truths to work, and to me, it's the only thing that has helped me along.
But any burden that we have in life, God will help to carry.
I think so. Casting
yes,
the burden. This is it. When I come to the end of my rope, I know there's a saying, but I can't remember what it was. But for me, anyway, I come to the end of my rope. I don't look for a longer rope. I just simply turn it over to God, and I do in my prayer life just say, "Here it is. You've got to help me, because on my own, I am not enough to do it." Usually in the person,
mm-hmm, and so
in the human creaturely way, I've run out of solutions, and so Father, you do it,
mm-hmm,
and He does.
yes,
In one way or another, a call comes in that helps. I might get an idea when I'm on a walk in the morning. There's just too many ways to discuss.
and again, grace comes when least expected.
Exactly, and it's not that I've deserved it. It's simply the way things are. The way things are is not the way we think they are. It's the way God has set them up.
Right. If God has intended to create us from all of eternity, and we are that unique, then we certainly know that God is going to be with us to support us, to guide us and bring us home again so that we might share eternity with God.
That's exactly right. And I heard a wonderful thing the other day. Someone was saying, I don't exactly remember where I heard that, but they were saying this way, that most of us in our day-to-day life, we think we're working to fulfill our own image of who we are. And yet we were not created in our own image. We were created in God's image. And it's that we have to allow for. So this goes back to your initial question, God, self, and work. I think God has set it up, if I may be so bold as to imagine, but I'm working with Scripture here, where we are to live out His image of who we are. That's vastly different from what we erroneously believe we are.
Mm-hmm. And when we speak about work, we can also be speaking about our vocation, which you write is our universal call to wholeness that teaches us how to love, to trust, to forgive, and to enjoy.
That's exactly right. So for example, the individual who's called to be a teacher, or who is called to be a landscaper, or who wants to start a business and feels that's their charter, well, you can be sure that in line with actualizing that vocation, that occupation, you're going to have some challenges. Things are going to come up that you did not expect. That rude student, that hostile parent, the lack of work, you can't find work as a landscaper, whatever. Well, as you press on in faith, there's where the dimension of character is going to open up, and the grace is going to flow into our lives. It doesn't come by cunning, our own cunning.
Mm-hmm.
It comes by giving. It almost comes by letting go, surrendering the fear to the honoring of the spiritual.